Hello everyone, wishing you relaxing moments while watching this video. Today all the mysteries about Tuanon's true identity will finally be revealed, including why he is called the Young Master and how he prepares to risk everything to save Chu Hu from the criminals holding her captive. After many exhausting days searching for Chu Hu without success, Tuanon had finally reached the limit of his strength. He traveled through forests and remote villages, asking everyone he met, yet there was still no sign of her. His face became worn from exhaustion and worry, especially knowing that dangerous forces were surrounding her. Realizing that time was running out and that he could no longer continue alone as a simple gardener, he made a decision he had avoided for a long time, returning to his true home. But the place he returned to was not the small wooden cabin in the mountains, it was a massive and luxurious mansion. The moment he arrived, the atmosphere inside the estate became serious and respectful. Every servant bowed their heads and greeted him as young master, revealing a shocking side of the man who had once lived covered in dirt among the mountains. The truth slowly became clear. Tuanon was actually the only son of one of the wealthiest and most powerful families in the region. Born into luxury and high expectations, he chose a completely different path from other rich heirs. Instead of depending on his family's fortune, he left the city to build his own life in the mountains. He started from nothing, planting trees and working with his own hands to create a peaceful life. Those years living simply shaped his strength and calm personality, while also giving him the chance to meet and save Chu Hu. Another surprising truth was revealed. The large hill where he and Chu Hu once worked together had always belonged to him. He chose to live there as an ordinary man because he wanted to build his future through effort rather than status. Now, standing inside the luxurious mansion once again, Tuanon felt deeply conflicted. He had abandoned the identity of a simple man to reclaim the power of a young master, not because he desired wealth, but because it was the only way to gain enough resources to rescue the woman he loved. After finally accepting the true identity he had hidden for so long, Tuanon understood that time was no longer on his side. Every moment he remained inside the luxury of his family mansion was another moment Chu Hu could be facing danger alone. Standing in the grand hall surrounded by servants, his mind remained fixed on the dark forest where the woman he loved might be struggling to survive. Realizing the situation had grown beyond the ability of one person to handle, he understood he could no longer continue searching alone. The people hunting Chu Hu were not ordinary criminals, but an organized group supported by people close to her. To fight against them, he knew he had to use the power and influence that came with his family background. Setting aside his pride and desire for independence, he decided to seek help from his family and the trusted connections his father had built over the years. Tuanon completely changed his appearance, abandoning the image of the simple mountain gardener. Dressed in an elegant tailored suit, he carried the presence of a powerful heir ready to take action. With this new identity, he met with a respected team of professional investigators who had long-standing ties with his family. His appearance as the young master immediately earned their respect and attention. During the meeting, he spoke directly and firmly about his intention to launch a large-scale search for Chu Hu. The investigators agreed to help, quickly beginning to gather information and narrow down possible locations where she could be hiding. Their goal was clear: find her and bring her to safety before the criminals reached her first. The combination of Tuanon's resources and the investigators' experience created a powerful search operation. This was no longer a desperate search filled with uncertainty, but a carefully planned mission following every possible clue. Tuanon personally joined the operation, using every resource available because he refused to lose Chu Hu again. The tension surrounding the mission grew heavier with every passing hour, as both sides raced against time to reach her first. For Tuanon, this was no longer just a search, but a battle for the life and freedom of the woman he loved. While Tuanon was using all his resources and connections to search for her, Tieu Hue continued living through the hardest days of her life in a distant rural area. She knew nothing about his true identity or the powerful rescue effort being organized for her sake. Every morning before the fog disappeared from the mountains, she quietly prepared baskets of vegetables and forest fruits to carry to the market and sell for survival. Her lonely struggle for survival made her more silent and withdrawn than ever before. Among the crowded market filled with sellers and buyers, her small figure blended into the crowd, her tired eyes always carrying caution and fear. She accepted every difficult job available, from carrying heavy goods to cleaning market stalls, only hoping to save a little money each day. Every coin she earned was carefully protected, not for herself, but to repay the debt left behind by her brother. Her dream of one day becoming truly free from debt and fear was the only thing keeping her from collapsing under the pressure of life. Yet the fragile peace around her was only an illusion hiding a dangerous storm. Even though she had hidden carefully, the violent men sent by her former husband had never stopped hunting for her. Guided by information from those who knew her whereabouts, and perhaps by clues left behind through her brother's betrayal, they quietly searched through villages and markets for traces of a lonely young woman. Her life remained surrounded by danger she could barely predict. Whenever she walked through empty roads or heard unfamiliar footsteps behind her, fear immediately filled her heart. Still, despite the fear and loneliness, she chose to continue enduring everything in silence. She buried the pain of betrayal and her longing for Tuanon deep inside her heart, using them as strength to keep moving forward. She believed that if she worked hard enough and repaid the debt, she could one day return to him without shame or fear. Her determination in the face of hardship was both heartbreaking and inspiring. But fate seemed ready to test her once again, as the people hunting her were slowly getting closer to the place where she had been hiding. After so many attempts to hide and constantly change locations, Tieu Hue's careful efforts could no longer overcome the persistence and cruelty of the people hunting her. After days of searching through villages and remote paths, the men working for her former husband finally discovered her routine. They secretly observed that after each market day, she always returned home through a lonely forest trail hidden among thick trees. The isolated path became the perfect place for a cruel ambush where no one would hear her cries for help. One exhausted evening after finishing work, Tieu Hue walked along the path completely unaware that dangerous eyes were watching her from the darkness. Suddenly, several men jumped out from both sides of the bushes and blocked her way. Startled with fear, she dropped the baskets she was carrying as panic immediately overwhelmed her. The men quickly surrounded her, leaving no path for escape. With threatening faces and cold voices, they demanded that she return with them to the house of her former husband, the place she saw as a living nightmare. One of the men grabbed her arm tightly and warned that she had been hiding long enough and now had to return to repay the debt. Tieu Hue fell into complete terror, struggling desperately and crying for help in the empty forest as darkness slowly surrounded the area. Every threat they spoke destroyed the small hope she had fought so hard to protect. At that moment, only one terrifying thought filled her mind: she had finally been found. She understood that if she was taken back this time, she would lose every remaining chance of freedom forever. Her dream of a peaceful future with Tuanon now seemed to disappear with every forced step she took beside the criminals. Just as the men working for her former husband were forcefully dragging Tieu Hue away, the sound of screeching brakes suddenly shattered the silence of the empty road. A luxurious car stopped nearby, and Tuanon stepped out with a completely different presence. Thanks to the precise information provided by the professional investigators, he had arrived at the exact moment needed to protect the woman he loved. His appearance shocked everyone there, especially Tieu Hue. No longer the simple gardener covered in dust, Tuanon now stood in an elegant suit, carrying the confidence and authority of a powerful man. His cold and fearless gaze alone was enough to make the criminals hesitate. Standing protectively in front of Chu Hu, shielding her from the men surrounding her, he spoke with a powerful voice and ordered them to leave. He firmly declared that he would repay the entire $200,000 debt owed by her brother without missing a single cent. The shocking statement stunned both the criminals and Chu Hu. The enormous debt that once seemed impossible to repay was now being resolved so easily by him. The men stared at him in disbelief, unable to understand why someone who looked like a wealthy executive would risk everything to protect a poor girl. Questioning his motives, they demanded to know why he would sacrifice so much for her. Without hesitation, Tuanon tightly held Chu Hu's trembling hands and revealed a truth that changed everything. He declared that she was his future wife and warned them never to harm her again. He ordered them to return and tell their boss that Chu Hu would soon marry him. His powerful words, combined with the support of the investigators standing behind him, made the criminals finally retreat in fear. They realized the man before them was not someone they could challenge without consequences. The dramatic rescue not only saved Chu Hu from being dragged back into suffering, but also revealed the true power and identity of the man who had quietly loved and protected her all this time. Yet the sudden appearance of such power also created a new emotional barrier inside Chu Hu's heart. After the criminals finally retreated and silence returned to the mountains, Chu Hu remained frozen in place, tears filling her eyes as she looked at Tuanon. She was completely shocked by the truth about his identity. The man who once shared simple meals with her and worked beside her in the mountains now stood before her as a wealthy and powerful heir. She could hardly believe that the humble man she knew was actually the son of one of the richest families in the region. Her shock became even more painful when she remembered his promise to repay the $200,000 debt. For her, that amount was an impossible burden she had expected to spend her entire life repaying. Yet for Tuanon, it seemed like only a small price to pay for her safety and freedom. At that moment, she deeply realized how enormous the distance between them truly was. It was no longer the distance between mountains and forests, but the gap between two completely different social worlds. Feelings of insecurity and inferiority quickly overwhelmed her. She looked at her rough hands hardened by labor, her worn clothes stained with dust and sweat, then compared them to Tuanon's elegant suit and powerful presence. Pain filled her heart as she convinced herself that she could never be worthy of someone as kind, wealthy, and powerful as him. She could not understand why a man like him would sacrifice so much to protect someone burdened with debt and hardship like her. Even after being rescued and publicly acknowledged as his future wife, her heart could not find peace. She feared that his feelings might only come from pity, or that if his love was real, she would still become a burden and a source of shame for his wealthy family. Now a painful question remained inside her heart. Would she find the courage to overcome the barrier between their worlds and accept his sincere love, or would she once again choose to leave him behind to protect the last piece of pride she still had? If you want to know whether Chu Hu will leave Tuanon again because of the gap between rich and poor, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to continue following their story.
Như thể họ đã gắn bó rất lâu, trong khi Tuấn Anh dùng đôi bàn tay mạnh mẽ của mình để nhổ những củ su hào, bắp cải mập mạp, thì Tieu Hue đã khéo léo cắt tỉa, nhặt bỏ những lá xô và sắp xếp chúng ngay ngắn vào trong gùi tre. Tiếng cười nói khẽ khẽ hòa quyện cùng tiếng xào xạc của lá cây tạo nên một bản giao hưởng thanh bình của lao động. Công việc nhà nông tuy vất vả, đôi bàn tay bắt đầu có những vết chai sần và tà áo lấm lem bùn đất. Nhưng Tieu Hue chưa bao giờ cảm thấy hạnh phúc đến thế. Cô trân trọng từng giọt mồ hôi rơi xuống mảnh đất này, vì đó là mồ hôi của sự tự do, của một kiếp người đang được tái sinh từ đống tro tàn của sự áp bức. Sau khi gùi hàng đầy ắp những nông sản tươi ngon nhất, hai người lại cùng nhau gùi hàng xuống núi để kịp phiên chợ sớm. Đường rừng dốc đứng và trơn trượt, nhưng mỗi khi Tieu Hue mệt mỏi, Tuấn Anh lại lặng lẽ dừng bước chờ đợi, chủ yếu đỡ lấy phần gùi gánh nặng hơn cho cô.